No problem. Thank you, Mabel. And then, yes, as Mabel mentioned, if there's any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. You can also come off mute and please, please, please interrupt me. This is very informal in that sense. And I love it when you have questions live spur of the moment. And so I'd love to talk about how you can try and craft a compelling story that's memorable and stands out when you're going for either your climate role, your dream product role, or your dream climate product role together. And so just for a quick agenda, these are rough timeframes. So I will give an example of what a level up scenario looks like, just my story, my background. We'll dive into the workshop, as Mabel mentioned, and then I do try to reserve as much time as possible for AMA. So any question, nothing is off limits, nothing is too personal. So please feel free. If it is something you feel that you would like to discuss in private, at the end, I'll share my email and you're more than welcome to email me and I'm happy to talk about it offline if that's better. Perfect. So first of all, it's nice to meet you. I apologize. This was kind of taken out of context. I was at a shopping mall and I saw this. I took this photo while I was interviewing for my current role at ChargePoint, and I sent it to my hiring manager saying, hey, I think you should hire me. As a joke, it was morally just humor based, but I hope that it helped to some degree. But as Mabel mentioned, I work at ChargePoint. I'm currently leading our CX software. So that is for customer support as well as customer experience management for B2B customers, so fleets, think like an Avis or an Enterprise Hertz rental car, any sort of distribution center, as well as large-scale enterprise customers as well. Just some fun facts. I believe I really, really like the climate mission. I have been very ignorant in my past few years, and that is on me. So a few great resources and goals that I've had is using REN as a platform to fully offset all of my CO2 emissions for the year. It's been a great learning tool for me as well. The goal being to plant 1,000 trees by the end of this year. Currently, I'm sitting at around 650. So still got some progress to make, but that's where we're at. In my free time, I'm a huge tennis fan, and I've played on all public courts in San Francisco County. So if anyone ever is in the area and wants to play, please feel free to reach out. And when I am traveling, I'm in search of the world's best cookies. I have a dangerous sweet tooth. So if anyone has recommendations, please let me know. I actually will be in London in Mabel's neck of the woods in a few weeks. And so if anyone has recommendations, feel free to send it to me. A little bit more of my background of how I got to ChargePoint. So I started off at IBM, and prior to that, I was actually at Google. I was working on their advertising team based in the Midwest in Ann Arbor. And so I was focused on SMB sales primarily for ad revenue as well as Google Sites revenue. This was more so targeting the folks that were not on a digital platform. So it was a lot of digital literacy enablement, trying to get SMB businesses to show up on Google Maps when you search for them, right? And optimize their online rankings. After that, I did spend some time in the wine and then the education space separately. And so I worked as a sales trainer and product trainer at FlockJ, helping people who had not yet completed a high school diploma degree pivot into tech sales or into tech product and tried to help get them placed on jobs. So a lot of the resume review here is similar fashion to what work I had done there. As well as in the wine space, I had focused mostly on go-to-market product management and changing the way we approached PLG for wine sales. When I joined IBM, I actually started in sales. Being in product was something I had not considered. There was no degree for it at the time. I really liked sales. Part of the reason was all my mentors said I liked golf and I liked eating out. And so that was kind of the reason everyone said you should go to sales. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. COVID hit, a lot of that stuff kind of winded down as the world went virtual. And I realized quickly that I wanted to have a different kind of impact, a little bit more strategic, a little bit more behind the scenes, since I wasn't able to travel to my customers. And so I switched over to a product role for Cognos Analytics, which is a BI tool similar to a Tableau or Power BI. And during that time, I also dueled for the IBM Ventures team, which was really, really cool, getting to work with startups and help with deal sourcing and some of that M&A and portfolio work, which had been a lot of fun. And then I moved over to ChargePoint. And so everything that had supported each of these transitions was this particular framework that I've used since about 2017. It was something that a professor of mine had actually helped me iterate over, was really clarifying why do you want something. For sales, it was very obvious. I did want to travel, I wanted to meet people, and I wanted to eat out, quite frankly. For why I wanted the niche of tech sales, I thought it was dynamic. Sales as an art form changed over time, And then same with product management, it iterates. The whole world changes year over year. Developing a unique view and prediction, this was something that I was very poor at personally, something that took me a long time to try and learn. What I thought counted as unique was not. It was quite mainstream and cliche. And then what's your prediction for a market? And it's not reciting gospel or regurgitating things you read online, but truly having your own prediction, as popular or unpopular as it may be. And then showcase, okay, if this is where I want to go and this is where the market's going, how does my personal development map to that alignment in the market? And then how do you showcase that in a unique way? And I can share these slides with everyone afterwards. These were two PowerPoint decks that I created, one for ChargePoint as a, hey, this is my pitch deck for why you should hire me. And then an annual recap is something I send to any prospective employer, as well as mentors that have helped me along the way. As a, this is your kind of annual report on all the things that I've done work-wise, and thank you so much for your support. So to give you a few examples, for me, the clearest transition was when I moved from IBM sales into product management. And so the why I wanted it was I wanted to be in a position where I could help influence the strategy moving forward. I was tired of being a seller, being told what to sell, waiting on the sidelines for a feature to come out, and then have to go try and convince a customer that a 3 month or 6 month delay was just par for the course. I didn't like that. I didn't feel like I could advocate for my clients the way I wanted to. And so the niche was I cared deeply about analytics in particular, partially because I think I love getting reports. I love newsletters. I love when someone sends me an inbox or an email in my inbox and it has numbers in it. And so that was something that I wanted all of my customers to feel empowered by, is not being scared of data, but just it is on the onus of ourselves as a BI enterprise or the Cognos team to make it easier for you to consume your data. So that was something that was really interesting to me. My unique view and prediction was actually a funny story. Because of my love for wine, and I've spent maybe 4 to 5 years studying wine, being in California, you kind of get bit by it in Sonoma and Napa, was there was a striking correlation between winemaking and the product's life cycle at IBM, which was we were at that time approaching a 9 month to a 1 year turnaround for major releases. That is the exact same process for winemaking, where you harvest annually, and then you have to pre-sell basically what's coming in the future. You bottle it, you store it, and as you keep storing, you keep sampling and pulling off stuff off the barrel into bottles, and then you can store it again, or you can ship it and then sell it that way. So the way that I had pitched why I was good for this job was product management to me was the blend of artistry with wine mixed with science and hypothesis testing, which is also part of winemaking. And so the way I actually did this was I shipped a few people at IBM bottles of wine, and over a career conversation, I tried my hardest to convince them that what we're experiencing in the wine sector is very similar to what is happening at IBM currently in one of our product streams. And if you hire me, right, that was where I was going with it, was if you hire me, I will bring a very different lens to it, in the sense I can sell something ahead of schedule. I can sell a wine that's 2 vintages behind or 2 vintages ahead, right? Selling wine futures or other types of things. And so that was my unique way into product. And the way I kind of presented it outside of these PowerPoints was I hosted wine talks oftentimes, and I just invite people in product to come and join. And it was just an education session. We'd all sit with a glass of wine, similar to a virtual happy hour, and we just talk about the state of where product was going at IBM, what problems they were facing, where they think the market's going to go. Hey, are we actually going to hire these people or not, right? All these conversations became fair game. And it gave me a lot of contextual clues so that in the interview process, when I tried to go for it, I had a lot more tools in my toolkit than I expected. And so that was extremely helpful. And so as I positioned from IBM over to ChargePoint, I have shared this with Mabel and Lana before. I actually didn't want to switch into climate per se. I do believe that every company is a climate company these days, or it will soon become one. Just like every company is an AI company at this point. Everyone's using models or different verticals or different use cases to try and improve their business. And I think that's going to be the same case with climate. What I loved with climate and my story there was I wanted to be in EV charging in particular, because growing up, my parents used to take me on road trips very often. And my favorite part was not the journey. It was not even the destination of seeing my family or my friends. It was I would get to stop at gas stations and go in and pick any candy I wanted. And that was my treat for being a good passenger in the back seat. Similarly, that journey has changed in the advent of EVs, where it's no longer a 5-minute detour to a gas station. It's perhaps 20 minutes to 45 minutes while you wait for your EV to charge. How can you capture a very energetic hyper child's attention when they're sitting in the back of a car or just sitting there at an EV charging station for 40 minutes? What do you really want to do? And my thinking was, I want to make that as fun as possible for a future child or a current child, right? Everyone thinks of EV target audiences as the parents or the mass market who drives the cars. I view it as the ancillary. Who are they actually driving, right? And that usually involves kids or friends or family or commutes to work. How do you make all of that a little bit more exciting outside of the minutia of just picking up stuff on the way to and from work or to and from home? The niche I had was on the analytics side. Currently in the EV space, there's a lot of data coverage that is not being looked at. Tesla is one of the largest holders of privatized data on the EV driving side, but on the network side, there's still a huge gap. And so that was just a very interesting challenge that I wanted to try and uncover is cover the amount of data on not just American networks, but European and Asian networks as well, something that has not been very well charted or navigated to date. The unique view and prediction I had on this one, and this is what I think was the selling point for me. I had said this to the hiring manager, to the executive sponsor, as well as the team, was my belief was all hardware in the EV charging business is going to get commoditized over time. For example, between a Shell and a BP gas station or other chains, no one really says, oh, they pump gas 5% faster, or it's usually they look nicer. It's just widget A versus widget B. So my thinking was all the stations are going to be commoditized. The only thing that's going to be different is the ecosystem. Price is going to be a variable of the market demand for that grid, which is in flux. There's nothing we can do as a private entity to control that. That's something that's up to your localized grid. So what we can control is the software and the ecosystem. So what happens if you say, hey, come to this particular network and you get rewards points for shops that you already currently serve at, or you get airline loyalty points for things that you might be working towards. I'm working towards a vacation next year and hopefully I'll take it. But that kind of experience is something that I'd really love. On the kids side, if anyone's ever played Pokemon Go or heard of it, my little cousin does. And I said, hey, what if there's a way to have some sort of booster if you charge at a particular station and it's more exciting for a kid that way? So that was kind of the prediction that I had. And the roadmap was a little bit of a tight timeline. My interview process with ChargePoint was around 6 months. However, the interview decision was made in 2 weeks. So from start to finish, that whole process was only 2 weeks. And so the roadmap part was basically all of the skills that I needed to learn about the EV industry, at least for the context that I was being hired for, was on all of the data fields and all of the architecture on how EV charging businesses were run, how EV demand works, who are the major players in the market. So your typical kind of top-down analysis. One angle that was a curveball for me in the interviews was on the legal aspect, something that I had always neglected and I regret. So I recommend just getting up to speed on things like NEVI funding and certain big pieces of legislation that are coming down, not just in the US, but for example, in Mabel's neck of the woods in the UK, they're changing the regulation for EV charging reliability as well. So just being generally aware of it, it's impossible to remember every new change, but just the general gist and who the regulatory bodies are, I think is really, really helpful. And so I'll pause there really quickly. Any questions, or I see pings in the chat.
Sorry, it's just a little discussion we have
Oh,
going.
discussion. Okay.
But we'd love to, yeah, hear from you for the next part.
Okay. All right. So the next part is a workshop.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, go ahead. Sasha, was it?
Yes, it's Sasha. Hi. Did you know that, did you take any exploring to figure out your niche, or did you, from the get-go think about EVs from that story that you shared?
That's a good question. I think that what I was looking for was the nexus of what I thought I was pretty decent at and what I enjoyed, which was I loved analytics and data work and I was decent at it. And so from there, I was like, okay, any company I look at, whether it's EVs or it's carbon capture or it's quite frankly any other core technology field, it was I'm looking for an analytics data focused PM role. I'm open to exploring any field. In the EV sector, it was more just I was attracted to the lack of data that was there. And so that was the reason I think it fit well, which was, hey, I really want to do analytics work. Oh, by the way, there's not that much data here. And I said, okay, great. Over time, we can build the database better. We can try and architect things a little bit cleaner for everybody else, not just ourselves, but other entities in the space. And then I can do my analytics work on top.
Thank you. I like how you think about it from your skill set, and then how to apply that in the different areas. Because I think I'm thinking about it from the other end of what area do I want to work in, and then how can I apply it. But thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Sasha, one other exercise I did during this process, it was not like a light bulb moment where I just knew analytics. I went to a few people, some were mentors, some were friends, and then some were just honestly just interviews that I messed up on. And I said, right now, if you could tell me just 2 things that you think I can do as a candidate, what do you think they were? And my answer was sales and analytics. Those were the 2 things people gave me. And so I said, okay, don't want to go back into sales, analytics it is. That's what the market's telling me. That's where I'm going to focus. And then in the chat, Keith, excellent question. I apologize if I glanced over that. So the interview process in terms of start to finish, from the time I started the process to getting hired was 6 months. The time it actually took to complete all of my interviews, all 4 rounds of interviews, was only 2 weeks. So there was just a delay in the actual hiring itself. But the regular interview cycle moved pretty quickly, which was 2 weeks. And what that looked like was the first call was with an executive sponsor. That was about an hour and a half. That was proving market understanding. So what's happening in the big picture of EVs, who are the main stakeholders and players. And then I had to pitch the vision, right? Hardware is going to be commoditized. Software is going to win. What builds better software? Stronger ecosystem. The second interview was with the hiring manager. That was more tactical, explaining my background, proving that hopefully I'm a good teammate and that they would enjoy working with me. And then lastly was meeting a few members of the team. And that was just trying to better understand what other responsibilities fell under the same director and how can I help support them, or what can I learn from them to be more successful in my role. And those were the three phases.
And then
I hope, Keith, that answers the...
So they gave you a verbal after that process, but then didn't hire you for 5 more months, or you didn't get it all for 5 more months, or?
Correct. And so I got the verbal, and then it was delayed due to a series of market changes and a few layoffs that happened in the middle. And so it was just kind of a sit tight situation. And then there was about a month of back and forth limbo negotiation before signing. Sorry, Keith,
Hope that answers the question. We might jump back if that's all right. We do also have Chidima in the chat with your hand raised for the question.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. If you decided to do this again, so like choosing like the EV charging sector as your focus, how would you go about it if you say you didn't have any like specific, I guess, applicable skill sets in like the auto industry or EV charging? And let's say you were like, you couldn't find a completely direct transferable skill.
That's a good question. I think finding a horizontal skill would be the first step. I think I've seen a lot of folks, myself included, when I started, I was too gung-ho about going into climate first and then figuring out what value I added second. If you find a horizontal skill, whether that's it could be a soft skill, it could be a technical skill, whether that's analytics or sales or finance, or maybe you're really, really good at program management, things of that nature. that horizontal skill might make it easier when you're looking. But for EV in specific, one thing that I think I would do if I did not have any analytics background at all would be to look at the annual report of every player in that market that's public, and then find every venture capitalist and every VC that has done extensive research or has a strong opinion and analyze it that way. Those are the two sources that I used. I looked at the annual report for ChargePoint, EVgo, Blink, Tesla, of course, and a few others, just to understand who the players were. And then second was I found a lot of the VCs that backed those companies in the beginning, and why were they so bullish? What did they see around the corner in the market trend or prediction? And that helped. I can try and find it and I'll follow up in an email. There was actually a really insightful podcast. I think it's called Business Breakdowns by Jesse Pujji, I think, if anyone's heard of that before. But there was one episode in particular on ChargePoint, and it was with a venture capitalist who I believe had participated or perhaps had analyzed the ChargePoint deal. And that gave me a lot of insight into how the business was changing.
Thank you so much. That is amazing. To give perspective, I have like a UX like research background, but sometimes yeah, I know a lot of things, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it directly translates to the thing that I want to focus on.
Yeah, I think UX is a very underrated skill. I will just say that as a general comment. I think it's an underrated skill in not just climate, but in just core tech in general. And so if UX, and you have an eye for that, UX/UI is your horizontal skill, I think a cool way you could potentially present this is any company, whether that's in EVs or carbon capture, go through their flow as if you were one of their customers or perhaps stakeholders, and then analyze it, give them feedback. And just honestly, I would say directly message someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm a UX researcher. I have a UX background. I just wanted to give you some helpful tip of advice on how to improve this flow, or why I think this actually is confusing for users. And dive into the psychology of behind it. And over time, that's a great segue when you're actually interviewing to show that you've already done your homework. And at the very least, I call it instead of having a portfolio of work of what you've done in the past, have an interview portfolio of analytic things that you've done or steps you've shown that you're serious about that interview. And so for past any interview, anybody who's asked me to help refer for an interview, the ones that I push through internally are the ones that show up with an idea, an opinion, some homework already done that isn't just, I looked at your website and I saw you had a job opening and I want it. It's more like, hey, I saw that this happened in the news. What does this mean for your balance sheet? Or what does this mean for XYZ thing? Hey, I actually think it could mean this for you. What do you think? I'd love to have that discussion. So it's not as direct, but I think it's a great way to showcase your skill and your value without needing to get stuck in the resume pit of applying and being one in a bucket. You get to hopefully short circuit that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So with that, we're going to move to the next section, which is around the workshop. And so as Mabel said, we have a few very brave souls. So I wanted to thank you in advance for offering up your resume to me over the weekend. I do have some feedback. Prior to that, I did notice actually if you're still on, I saw that you did take on a new role in the sustainability sector. And I would just love if you could share with everyone what worked for you, since that was a recent win.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rahul, for an incredibly engaging section. So a little bit of background about me. I've been in the tech sector for about 8 years. I've started as a software engineer, and then about a year later transitioned into product. So I've been in product for 7 years. My last role was at an enterprise tech company called Infor, and I was a product director. So that was where I'd say the start of my sustainability journey sort of start to simmer a little bit. I wouldn't attribute that to a full sustainability role, but since I was working on fashion supply chains and providing software for supply chain operations and financial management, of course, sustainability had kind of become a hot topic in the last few years. And personally, a few years ago, I did try to convince management to invest in a product, which means giving resources to assemble a team. At that time, there was not enough product market fit. There was also just not enough money for a multi-billion-dollar company to really pay attention. So sort of was just working with my internal colleagues and discussing the trends that we were seeing and gathering data and anecdotes from our customers on what they are hearing, what they're concerned about, what's keeping them up at night. And increasingly, sustainability risks were starting to come into the conversation as regulations start to be developed across North America and the EU. So we got management to start paying attention from a risk perspective. Then we needed to have something tangible for them to invest in. So my VP and I looked across the product portfolio, and we found a beta project that was sort of just sitting dormant for about 5 years. It was initially, and I can say it because they're not a client anymore, it was initially developed with Patagonia, which everyone knows is huge in the fashion sustainability world, but it never took off. So I took that under my product portfolio and grew it into a full-fledged product, and it sort of became our entry into the sustainability ESG world. And from then on, it was pretty interesting because it was quite new it's a new product in a mostly legacy system. So effectively, I became the GM of that product, figuring out how to sell, where to sell, what to develop, how to engage analysts, from Gartner and other industry reports to even talk about us and tell us, what we need to know. And eventually, getting together some experts and doing thought leadership on, not just the technology solution, but behaviors that need to be changed within our clients. So that was sort of my intrapreneur corporate adventure into sustainability. Eventually, I did quit Infor, so I quit in July or August, and part of that was because I was interested in solving other problems. I grew up in Vietnam and India before moving to the US, and when I went to Southeast Asia and to South Asia, actually on a business trip early this year, I really saw the climate change impact. And that sort of shocked me into wanting to work on solutions that had kind of more urgent impact. And so I decided to quit and pursue urban sustainability. This is a brand new field for me. I had no stake in it whatsoever. I didn't go to school for urban planning. Any knowledge I had was purely through research. So I knew I needed to plug in those gaps. And part of plugging in those gaps was, I sort of hate the word networking. So connecting with people and understanding, you're in this space, what problems are you having? How can I help? And the great thing about product management is there are a ton of transferable skills. So I would jump in and help people from everything from strategy consulting to website development to eventually taking on a pro bono role as a product lead for Teal Towns, which is a nonprofit hoping to fight the loneliness crisis and the climate crisis at the same time. And they had also a dormant project of an AI urban planner. And so I've been working with the team there to sort of get it up and running. And that's sort of how I'm plugging in the gaps in my experience.
That is super cool. That is super. And I think you said a couple things that I wanted to touch on. One was when you went to your Southeast Asia trip and you had that kind of aha moment. I think for most people, if you've already had that moment and that's why you want to transition into climate or climate product leadership, that should be the start of your why, at least introspectively. And then what An did that I think is really, really smart was if you see gaps on your resume in terms of experience for climate, or you're hearing that feedback when you're interviewing around, start with the company you're on or start with a project. I've seen it in the gigs channel on the Work on Climate community, or there's a lot of project ideation going on. Start something of your own so you at least starting to fill those gaps. And the coolest thing would be to do a similar entrepreneurship experience, because then when you do interview and they already buy into your vision, you can say, hey, not only have I actually understood what it means to be a climate PM or work in climate, I've turned a company or I've turned some behavioral switch in the company I work for currently to think of things more sustainably, which is a much harder feat versus a company that starts from the ground up already believing in climate as a pillar. And so that is an extremely cool experience. And I hope you write about that. If you write about that, I'd love to read it, about that entrepreneurship experience.
I should. I'm terrible at organizing all my experiences all together, but it's encouraging.
That would be really cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. And Mabel, do you want to stop the recording and we can move to the